Every Sunday, I joined my future in-laws for dinner at their estate in Forest Hill. I would leave feeling like I had been hollowed out, dizzy, barely able to keep my eyes open, sometimes waking up on their living room couch with no memory of sitting down. My fiancé said it was exhaustion. He said I was overworked and anxious, and that I needed to stop bringing my office paranoia into his family's home. Then I checked the security log on my encrypted work laptop one evening, and the timestamp told me exactly what had been done to me while I was unconscious on their couch. Before I tell you the rest, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever had someone try to use your own hard work against you, hit like and subscribe, because this story is for you. My name is Nadine. I'm 29 years old and I'm a senior forensic analyst at the Ontario Securities Commission. My job is to find the hidden money trails that sophisticated white-collar criminals believe are invisible. I trace shell companies back to their real owners. I reconstruct financial records that people have already tried to shred. I've helped build cases that have sent executives to federal prison, and I have never once taken that career for granted. I grew up in a rented apartment in Scarborough with a single mother who worked double shifts at Toronto Western Hospital. I put myself through university on bursaries and part-time work, passed my CPA examinations on the first attempt, and spent 6 years earning every single credential attached to my name. My fiancé came from a different kind of life entirely. His family, the Hargroves, were one of the most well-regarded Black Canadian families in the city. His parents had built a real estate development company over 30 years, starting with a single investment property in North York and expanding into a portfolio of luxury condominiums and commercial projects across the Greater Toronto Area. They lived in a 6-bedroom stone house in Forest Hill with a gated driveway and an interior decorator on permanent retainer. His mother had a lifestyle column in a magazine for Black Canadian professionals. His father sat on the board of the Hargrove Family Foundation, a registered charity that distributed grants to youth arts and mentorship programs across Ontario. They were philanthropists, they were pillars. They hosted fundraising galas and smiled from glossy event photos alongside city councillors and Bay Street executives. They were also, as I was about to discover, desperate. The Sunday dinners started after my fiancé and I got engaged. His mother insisted on them. She said that a woman entering their family needed to understand what the Hargrove name meant in this city, and that family cohesion was everything. The meals were elaborate: 3 courses, formal table settings, imported wine, a level of scrutiny disguised as warmth. She would ask about my upbringing in Scarborough with the patient curiosity of someone filing information under a label she had already assigned. My fiancé would sit at the far end of the table and let it happen. The first time I fell asleep on their couch, I thought nothing of it. It had been a brutal week at the office. The second time, I was embarrassed. The third time, I was frightened. But every time I woke up groggy and confused, my fiancé had an explanation ready before I could finish the sentence. I was overworked, I was anxious, I hadn't eaten enough before the wine, I had embarrassed him in front of his family again. On the 4th Sunday, I woke up to find my blazer pushed off my shoulders, my blouse pulled out of my waistband on one side, and the clasp of my bra hanging fully open beneath my shirt. I lay completely still on that leather couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the information arrive. My mouth tasted like chalk. My head throbbed with a dull chemical pressure that had nothing to do with the half glass of Bordeaux I had barely touched at dinner. I reached back slowly and felt the unfastened clasp. The skin on my arms went cold. I had been sitting at their dining table when everything went dark. I had not done that myself. His mother was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with a dish towel, watching me with the mild distaste she usually reserved for my outfits. "There she is," she said with a warmth that functioned as its opposite. We were beginning to wonder. I asked where my fiancé was. She told me he had stepped out to take a call. I said I wasn't feeling well. She said that was quite obvious and suggested I should perhaps see a doctor about my stress levels, given how frequently I seemed to put them all in this position. On the drive home, I told my fiancé what I had noticed about my bra. He sighed the way people sigh when they have rehearsed the sigh in advance. "You were burning up," he said, not looking at me. "You were complaining about the heat. You practically undid it yourself because you said you couldn't breathe." My mother was absolutely mortified. I said that wasn't what happened. I said I had no memory of feeling hot. Nadine, he said, in the measured tone of a man who has already decided the conversation is finished, you spend 60 hours a week investigating fraud. You see criminal intent in everything. You cannot keep bringing that mentality into my family's home and accusing people of things because you had too much wine. I sat back and watched the streetlights of St. Clair slide past the window. I let him talk, and in the silence behind his words, I was already running the numbers. When someone explains away an anomaly too smoothly, too quickly, and too completely, in my experience, they already knew the explanation before the question was asked. That night, I went directly to my desk and unlocked my OSC-issued laptop. It was a security-hardened machine that logged every access attempt with a timestamp, a device identifier, and a biometric scan result. I opened the audit trail. 2 failed biometric scan attempts, 7:52 p.m. and 7:54 p.m., both from a location that matched the GPS data still cached in the file header. Both rejected by the system's retinal scan protocol because the security software requires confirmed pupil dilation, a living conscious eye, to grant access to the hard drive. At 7:52 p.m., I had been unconscious on their living room couch. Someone had held my face up to the camera. I sat in the dark of my condo and did not move for a very long time. The morning after, I submitted an internal document search through our case management system. It took 48 hours to return results. When they did, I had to read the summary 3 times before I let myself believe it. 6 weeks earlier, a complaint had been flagged by FinTrack and routed to my department. It concerned an Ontario holding company called Meridian Crest Capital Inc., which had filed a preliminary prospectus for a TSXV listing. The complaint alleged the prospectus contained materially false asset valuations, inflated projections, fabricated lease agreements, property appraisals that bore no relationship to market reality. The case had been assigned to a junior analyst in my division. He had quietly asked me to review one section of the financial statements as an informal second opinion between colleagues, undocumented. I had flagged a significant discrepancy in the asset pool, told him to escalate it through proper channels, and forgotten about it entirely within 48 hours. Meridian Crest Capital Inc. was a wholly owned subsidiary of Hargrove Developments. The OSC audit flag attached to that file was sitting between the Hargrove family and a successful public listing that would have injected millions of dollars into a company that, I was only beginning to understand, had almost nothing left. They had not forgotten about me. They had been planning for months. The next morning, I went to Sunnybrook Hospital. I told the emergency intake nurse that I believed I had been given a sedative without my knowledge or consent. A physician drew blood and sent it for a full toxicology panel. Results came back within 24 hours. A synthetic benzodiazepine compound, present in concentrations consistent with oral ingestion 6 to 8 hours prior. The physician documented it in my file. I left with 2 printed copies of the report and a cold, clarifying fury that had nowhere to go yet except forward. I was not going to the police that day. I had spent enough years watching powerful families with expensive Bay Street lawyers turn credible accusations into procedural mire to know better. My word against theirs was not close to a fair contest, not yet. What I needed was evidence that could not be explained away, recanted, or buried under character assassination. My fiancé had already been building the foundation for that. The overworked girlfriend, the paranoid investigator, the working-class woman who didn't belong in their world and knew it. I was going to let them finish building it, and then I was going to use it against them. I found what I needed through a specialty security equipment supplier I occasionally used for work investigations. A miniature high-definition camera, embedded in a standard shirt button, nearly indistinguishable from the pearlescent buttons on the blazer I wore to their dinners every Sunday to meet his mother's dress code. It stored footage locally and streamed simultaneously to an encrypted cloud server. I paid for overnight shipping on a prepaid credit card and had it delivered to my office address. I spent 3 evenings sewing it onto the lapel of my blazer, testing the angle from every position. Seated, slumped, lying down, running the audio through my speakers until a whisper from across my living room came through perfectly clean. In the meantime, I played my part. I texted my fiancé that he was probably right about my stress levels and that I had made a doctor's appointment. He replied with a single thumbs up. I performed the role of a woman who had been successfully managed. I also called a colleague at the OSC, one of the 2 people in my professional life I would trust with my career and my safety simultaneously. I told her everything. I sent her the laptop security log, the toxicology results, and a duplicate of the camera footage already accumulated from weeks prior. And then I asked her to pull the Hargrove Family Foundation's T3010O charitable return filings from the last 4 years before we spoke again. She called me back in under 4 hours. The foundation reported over $800,000 in grants distributed to Black youth organizations across Ontario over the past 3 years, she said. Her voice was very quiet. We can only verify $210,000 through the receiving organization's own financial records. I asked her where the rest went. She said she was still tracing it, but the routing led to a holding entity registered in the Cayman Islands. The beneficial owner listed on that entity shared a name with the registered director of Meridian Crest Capital as filed. My future sister-in-law's husband. The man they had positioned next to my unconscious body for staged photographs had been embezzling grant money from a foundation meant to fund youth mentorship and arts access programs for Black communities across Ontario. He had been doing it for at least 3 years, funneling the funds through cryptocurrency exchanges, chasing high-leverage positions on obscure tokens, losing consistently, and doubling down each time. The crypto market had corrected severely. His positions had been wiped out by automated margin calls. According to the blockchain transaction records my colleague pulled, the offshore wallet balance was effectively zero. The $600,000 gap in the foundation's books was not an accounting error. It was gone, spent on bad trades and worse judgment, and the annual charitable audit was 4 months away. The Meridian Crest IPO was not just securities fraud, it was a rescue mission. A successful public listing would inject enough capital into Hargrove developments to quietly cover the foundation shortfall before anyone looked closely at the numbers. The OSC audit flag, the one I had helped put there, was the only thing standing between the Hargrove family and survival. They had needed me to remove it. They had planned to blackmail me into doing so. And they believed, as my future mother-in-law had said at dinner once while I was supposed to be too dazzled by the crystal and the cashmere to pay attention, that a woman who had worked hard for everything she had would do anything to protect it. She was not wrong that I would do anything. She was only wrong about what. I spent 2 more days assembling the full package: the security log, the toxicology report, the camera footage, the foundation filing discrepancy mapped against verified disbursements, the Meridian Crest prospectus with my flag notation attached, and my colleague's blockchain trace linking the shell entity to my future sister-in-law's husband. I compiled everything onto an encrypted USB drive and prepared a formal disclosure addressed to the OSC Director of Enforcement, FinTrack's Intelligence Division, and the RCMP's Commercial Crime Section. I set an automated email with the decryption key to deliver at 9 p.m. the following Friday. That Friday was the Hargrove Family Foundation's annual charity gala, held every year in a hotel ballroom in Yorkville. 400 guests, Bay Street investors, municipal politicians, and the executive directors of every Black youth organization in Ontario the foundation claimed to support. The people whose grant money had been used to fund losing cryptocurrency positions would all be in the same room. My fiancé texted me that week, "Don't forget the gala Friday. My parents expect you there. Bring your work laptop. We'll sort out that audit issue privately before dinner." I texted back, "Of course, I'll be there. I have something for all of you." I wore a charcoal column dress and the blazer with the camera button sewn carefully back into place. I carried my encrypted laptop and the USB drive in the interior pocket of my bag. I retained 2 private security professionals through a firm in Mississauga and briefed them in full, and they arrived at the hotel ahead of me and positioned themselves along the edges of the ballroom in hotel staff clothing. I arrived at 7, smiled at my future mother-in-law's greeting, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, and spent the first hour being gracious and compliant and entirely invisible. I listened to my fiancé's father give a short speech about community and legacy. I watched my future sister-in-law's husband work the room, shaking hands with church elders and foundation board members whose donated dollars had funded his margin account. I smiled, I waited. At 8:45, my future father-in-law guided me toward a private meeting room off the main corridor with 4 lawyers inside and a document already laid out on the table. It was an amendment to the Meridian Crest prospectus with my name listed as a corroborating compliance reviewer. A signature line waited at the bottom with a gold pen laid beside it. His mother told me to sit. She told me to sign. She told me that my fiancé would release the photographs to my professional association and to the OSC's director the moment I walked out of that room without signing, and that by Monday morning I would have no career, no reputation, and nowhere left to go. I sat. I opened my laptop. I looked at each of them, my fiancé, his parents, his sister, and the man whose gambling had burned 600,000 Andre meant for youth programs, and I said, before I sign, I'd like to make one request. I'd like to show the foundation's donors what their contributions have built. Can we use the presentation screen in the ballroom? It would mean everything to me to do this in front of the people who made the Hargrove Foundation possible. His mother studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, the particular smile she reserved for moments of victory, and said that was the most sensible thing I had ever proposed. She walked me back into the ballroom herself. The hotel's AV technician connected my laptop to the ballroom's primary display. A 16-foot panel visible from every seat in the room. My future father-in-law tapped the microphone and said something warm about legacy and community. He gestured toward me. 400 people turned. I connected the USB drive. I opened the first file. The image that appeared on that screen was not a highlights reel or a grant recipient photo montage. It was a side-by-side comparison of the T3010O charitable return figures and the verified disbursement records from every organization the foundation claimed to have funded. 2 columns, one showing $800,000 distributed, one showing $210,000 confirmed, with the routing numbers of the discrepancy laid out in a clean red highlighted trail that ended at a Cayman holding entity. The sound that moved through that room was unlike anything I have heard before or since. Someone near the front dropped a glass. A woman began to cry. A Bay Street investor was already on his phone before I opened my mouth. The Hargrove Family Foundation, I said, and the microphone carried my voice to every corner of the room, has for 3 years reported grant distributions that do not match the records of the organizations that were supposed to receive them. The gap is not an accounting error. The gap is $590,000, routed through an offshore shell company to cryptocurrency exchanges, where it was traded aggressively and lost entirely. My future mother-in-law stepped forward. One of my security professionals stepped between us, quietly and without drama. I clicked to the next slide. The blockchain ledger, the exchange transaction history, the margin call records, the beneficial owner registration. Then the biometric access log from my OSC laptop, timestamped to a Sunday evening at the Hargrove family home, with the device identifier linked, through a network trace my colleague had completed, to a personal device belonging to my future sister-in-law's husband. He was standing near the back of the room with a champagne flute. He set it down very slowly on the table beside him, and then he sat, and he did not get up again. I clicked to the final file. Audio only, 90 seconds. My future mother-in-law's voice giving instructions in a room she believed was private. My fiancé's voice, steady and businesslike, saying they were running out of time. My future sister-in-law's compliance, word for word. The executive director of one of the youth mentorship organizations in the front row stood up and walked toward the stage. A city councilor near the center aisle had already risen and was heading for the exit, shaking his head. The foundation board members looked at each other and then at the Hargroves, and one by one they began to reach for their phones. My future father-in-law gripped the edge of the stage and tried to speak into the microphone. My fiancé crossed the room toward me with his jaw tight, and my second security professional caught his arm and held it, simply and efficiently, without a word exchanged. At 9:01 p.m., my automated email delivered the complete encrypted package to the OSC Director of Enforcement, FinTrack's Intelligence Division, and the RCMP Commercial Crime Section, with a note that the subjects could be found at a specific Yorkville hotel address. 43 minutes later, 2 plainclothes RCMP officers and an OSC enforcement team walked through the hotel's main entrance. The gala was still underway. The catering staff had stopped moving. The jazz trio had not played a note in over 30 minutes. My fiancé and his father were escorted from the room. My future sister-in-law's husband was arrested near the surface, still buttoning his jacket, and he did not resist. My future mother-in-law remained in her chair near the stage, very still, looking at the emptying room, the overturned programs, the abandoned dinner plates, the foundation's own banner hanging above the chaos she had orchestrated, and she said nothing at all. I took my laptop and my bag. I buttoned my blazer. I thanked the security professionals, shook their hands, and walked out of that Yorkville ballroom into a clear October night with Lake Ontario air coming cold off the water, and I did not look back once. In the months that followed, the Meridian Crest prospectus was suspended pending full investigation and referred to the federal crown. My former fiancé and his father were both charged with securities fraud and conspiracy to obstruct a regulatory investigation. My former sister-in-law's husband was charged with criminal breach of trust and fraud, over $5,000 in connection with the foundation embezzlement, charges that carry up to 14 years under the criminal code. The youth organizations that had been shorted their grants were identified and partially made whole through asset seizure proceedings. The foundation was dissolved. His mother faced no criminal charges, but the development company had no assets that weren't already encumbered, no creditworthy partners, and no reputation left to trade on. It collapsed before Christmas. She moved, I was told, to a rental apartment in another part of the city, somewhere unremarkable, somewhere far from the dinner tables and charity galas and glossy magazine columns that had defined her life for 30 years. I was promoted to principal analyst at the OSC 6 months after the gala. I keep a copy of the Sunnybrook toxicology report in the second drawer of my desk, not as a wound, but as a reminder of the specific moment I decided that the thing they were trying to take from me was the exact thing I was going to use to destroy them. They believed that because I had worked hard for everything I had, the threat of losing it would silence me completely. They were almost right. But there is something particular about a woman who has spent years learning exactly how powerful people hide their crimes. When those people reach for her career as a weapon, they hand it back to someone who already knows how to aim. If anyone has ever tried to use your own success as a lever against you, your job, your reputation, the life you built with your own 2 hands, tell me your story in the comments. And if you want more stories about people who found justice when they had every reason to stay quiet, like this video and subscribe to Jumpy Revenge. Because the truth does not disappear. It just waits for the right moment to arrive.